course, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting
I'm
me.
so excited to have you.
Awesome.
I'm such a big fan. You're actually one of the very first artists that I've ever did any type of work with.
Oh, wow.
Your Blackbird exhibition at Gallery Camille.
Mm-hmm.
It's still one of my favorites to go back to.
Oh, that's so wonderful. That's wonderful. And I still have, that voice for artivism that I do in terms of capturing the idea of what loss is like for women of color, Black and brown women, in terms of having to bury their children. Mm-hmm. And what that in this floating rock we call the world or our planet can be like. Mm-hmm. So
I think it's a topic that often we live life without wanting to address.
Yeah. I mean, people don't want to talk about death or, death is going to happen, but we as humans don't have to help it. Mm-hmm. We don't have to cause harm against other humans to help death because we all will have an end date that is already ours. So when folks take other people's lives because they don't value them, that's when I step in and have to use my art as my superpower to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is recently I've been thinking about this topic. I think it's a topic that a lot of people fear, but I started to pivot the way that I thought about it in terms of experiences. Like we have experiences before we enter this world. We have experiences during this. Like I was just recently watching videos from my childhood.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh my God, it was like a different life.
Yeah, because you had freedom and you didn't have worry and you just knew that you were going to eat and your parents loved you and you had a home. And as an adult, you have purpose, you have, people that you have to care for, and you know that if you don't do certain things, it will not give the reaction of the other things that you need to do as an adult. So I think as children, there's an era of freedom. Like we used to just take off running or, when you were hungry, you could say to somebody, I was hungry.
And you didn't fear food.
No, you didn't. And so now it's like, we have all of these things that we have to think about in this world. Like there are daily assassins that we have to avoid, whether it's driving a car or walking down the street or viral infections or just things that get into our senses that we have to block out. So you didn't think about those as a kid. Like even when you fell, you just fell.
Yeah.
Now as an adult, you have to think about how you fall, what happens after you fall, who will care for you.
Because the back thought of it is always
fear.
And it's so closely tied to success because I feel like as we transition into responsible adults, that thought of what does success mean to us? How do we achieve success? How do we feel about what other people, their perspective about our success?
Yeah.
How do you define success?
Well, anybody who sets out on a journey and they have a mission and a plan, and they have a mentor or someone who helped them with the projection of their plan or the layout of their plan, to follow that. Not everybody has a plan, but most of us have a mission. And so if you're living in your purpose, I consider that successful. So hopefully most folks know what their purpose is. And so I don't equate it to wealth in terms of monetary success. What feeds your heart, your head, and your hands, and what gives you like the idea of sanctuary within yourself and knowing that you are on a journey with a higher purpose. And whatever that purpose is, if you're walking in that journey, that is successful. For me.
Did you find, when did you connect to that meaning of success?
Well, my mother always says something that I said on stage the other night, if you live long enough, you'll see. I think as a witness, as a child who's always feeding her eyes and asking questions and wondering why things are made the way they are, or why people are the way they are, and often asking and looking and seeking. I feel like you're never too old to learn. And so I'm always willing to learn. And so as I also investigate the world around me, I'm always investigating who I am in it. And so always learning more about myself and thinking about the little Sabrina, you know, and how she was. And is she still in there? And am I protecting her? Am I opening doors for her? Am I feeding her the food that she needs through her eyes, through her ears, through her senses? And so knowing that as long as there's joy and optimism in me and my daily walk, then I must be doing something right. And so yesterday was a day of grace and gratitude, and hopefully every day is a day of gratitude. I don't often give myself permission to have grace with it. Yesterday I did. I just needed to sit still and to take inventory of how I felt and to unpack what I was feeling.
What were you feeling?
It wasn't rage, it was disappointment. It was the idea that I have to be a brighter light in my community for those who are sitting in darkness. And knowing that everything is about divine purpose and timing. And so I just felt like I needed to sit quiet, to go to my studio and make, because that is my gift, that is my present. And to just make a social media post about shining your light, to be a beacon in your community, to be the medicine that sometimes others need, and also giving yourself permission to have grace. And just, if you have to be quiet in that moment, it's okay to do that. So that's all the things I was feeling yesterday and today.
And just for reference, for anyone watching, maybe a year from now, yesterday was?
It was a presidential election day. And yesterday was the day that one of the candidates who I didn't vote for won. And it's okay because politicians don't get to make decisions by themselves. So even had the candidate that I voted for won, they are still a part of a community that has to listen to those around them, like the Congress, the governors, and all of, you know, whoever is running the House. But both red and blue teams are still in it for capitalism and sometimes to honor the community that voted them in. But there's also a moment when we as citizens have to be accountable for not waiting for folks to come and save us, but also to create the communities from the small little ponds that we have, and hopefully putting in some positive light that ripples throughout our community, like planting whatever it is we need. And I'm not just talking about a physical garden, but a spiritual garden and a psychological garden where we are our own caretakers, our own healers, our own presidents, our own community residents and activists and healers and all of the things that we need in communities when communities are set up.
Yeah.
And so just taking note and inventory of who I am, whose I am, and making sure that I keep my word to myself, to also walk in gratitude with those ancestors that were here way before me and set up my life so that I didn't have to struggle like they did. Even though I still have my own things, they made a way for me to not have the same life that they did. And so I have to honor them by preparing to make a life and a way for those that are not yet here. So,
and you know, one of the very first things that I felt when I woke up yesterday was hurt. And I felt hurt because for the first time, I felt like we had not figured out as a race yet how to be united.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the very first thing I felt was, man, it just hurts that there's still so many people that have not connected yet, you know? But I think it really is an opportunity because I feel like every single thing happens for a reason. You know, I've heard people say this term many times. God will keep sending you the same lesson until you learn it. So I feel like it's just after because I did the same thing. I came to my studio, just was silent, didn't talk to anyone, didn't post anything. And I just sat with my thoughts and I just talked to God and I said, you know, I trust you. I know that this is for a reason. And I walk with that faith, you know?
That's so good. That's good.
Yeah, you know, recently I went to your artist talk at the Charles H. Wright Museum because you were featured in the James Baldwin exhibition at that. And I also learned that the Charles H. Wright Museum was the very first African-American history museum in the country, which blew my mind. How has your contribution to that show inspired by his legacy?
Well, the name of the show is Frontline Prophet James Baldwin, which is co-curated by Ashara Ekandayo and Omomisha McGowan. And it started a year ago. We opened in Harlem. The full exhibition opened in Harlem on his 99th birthday. From Harlem, it went to Oakland, California. I think it went to New Orleans. And then it went to Oakland. And then from Oakland, it went to Chicago. And then it landed in Detroit August 2nd, his 100th birthday. Simultaneously, at the same time, we were also in Paris, opening the exhibit on September the 10th in Paris at American University of Paris during the James Baldwin Festival or celebration there, his centennial celebration after the Olympics. I would say, as someone who baptized herself in his images and drawing, painting, doing installations for the whole year since, starting some of the work in 2016 after returning from Paris with Jessica Care Moore. As I read more and listen to more, thinking of one of his statements yesterday, where he talked about the moral apathy of this country and people who identify within racial backgrounds of whiteness and blackness as opposed to being human. And maybe you can talk about your ethnicity, but the race is only one race, right? And we're not racing. We're all here, right? And so just thinking about what he said in the moments in his short life of 63 years influenced a lot of people to rethink how they held the notion of what it is to be human, what it is to identify in certain ways and communities where you might not be liked for what you say you are or who you say you are or how you say you are, and what it is to offer words of wisdom to get you across a bridge, if you will, in life. And I think he ushered so many of us that we're still talking about his importance. And so I will say, as a Baldwinning artist, because I'm not a Baldwinite, I know people who write on him and who've done deep dive studies on his literature. I'm just thinking of his life's path and how he just held so many things that he witnessed and also activated as an activist to stop apartheid in the ways that it was wrong here in this country and also in Turkey, with the Algerians being in Paris and knowing what it was like to experience that at home firsthand. And going to a country that he didn't have to worry so much about his assassins coming after him that this country had him have to worry about. And so seeing it from an outside bird's eye view and knowing what it is to have people hate you because of your ethnicity, right? And not knowing you was, his mission in terms of teaching people what it is to get to know someone or what's wrong with apartheid. It's either wrong or it's right. And so I just think of all of the things that he would have gone through as somebody who was born in, 2024, 100 years ago. And what it must be like to ask a young person, do you know who James Baldwin is? And they have no idea, right? So it's my duty to bring him back in a way that offers several introductions, either through his writings, through my artwork, through the augmented reality, or some of the videos and sound bites in the film, or some of my installations, or just the fact that I am focusing on him. So people are like, what is this? Who is this? Why are you doing it? And to bring young people to the table so that they can eat some of that, right?
It's such a beautiful flow of life, because I feel like though young people may not remember him, they will be introduced to him through how his work impacted the people that live today in this world that are still influenced by, his work and his artistic expression. I think there's so many creative, artistic people that it's so cool to witness their legacy live on long after they leave this earth.
Yeah. Well, if you do the work you're supposed to do, your work will continue on, and so will your name.
Yeah.
And so that is my hope.
You guys also explored a very interesting topic during that panel. The relationship between Black artists and white-owned institutions. How do you navigate that dynamic in your career?
It's not my job to navigate it. It's my job to keep doing the work. And as I'm doing the work, whatever is for me, and whoever calls me forward, they will call me forward. And if I am willing to walk through that space, I'm willing to walk through. And if I can't, I'm doing something else. And so I don't really hold a scorecard or a playbook of who should show me where I should go. It is my hope that someone wants to hear what I have to say and look at what I'm doing in a broad sense of what I'm doing. I'm saying something. I have a message. And so if there are bigger institutions that have more funding, which typically are the white institutions, that's fine. But if they're small with no budget, if I'm available, I'm doing it. So I'm talking to everybody and being in a very humanistic way that Baldwin wanted us to be in. Like, I will bleed and so will you. And if you're willing to host what I'm doing, so another group of, demographics that maybe weren't included at this institution that now will be included at this one, let's go.
You can't undermine scars. I think that it's so important to remember that it's not something you can turn off. You made a point earlier that you talked to the younger Sabrina, and I recently just met and had a conversation with another woman in power leader, and she says she prays to her young self.
Yeah.
And I thought that is such a fascinating point, because for me, and as I mentioned to you off camera, I recently have been diving into videos of me as a child, and it's almost like the scars of being a child, in a way, kind of not forced me, but made me want to forget, And I think that being able to reconnect to your younger self really is a full scope, full circle experience.
And to be what your younger self needed you to be. Like, I needed protection, I needed love, and I needed nurturing. And so now I give myself the grace of knowing that, if I could be that caretaker for my younger self, that's how I should care for myself. To be the protector, the caretaker, and to nurture myself, because I'm still, that little Sabrina is still in here. And it's good to kind of say, I got you. You'll be okay. You'll be fine. You will make it. You will survive. And so I think there is something really beautiful that happens when you give yourself grace and you tell yourself thank you and you give yourself permission to move forward. But also know that those failures and traumas really taught you how to not accept those things any longer and to protect yourself and speak for yourself and also say, we're not doing this. We're not going to allow this to happen as an adult.
Because I feel like you can't move forward until you face those scars.
Absolutely.
I think that I agree with you. I think that any opportunity that comes, it was meant for you.
Yeah.
I think that you cannot go to the top of a mountain that has no tracks laid out. Like, it's hard.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to do it, but it has to be done if there's no path there.
Absolutely.
So I think it's just one of those things that you can't blame somebody who doesn't know.
Absolutely. That's true. But, long as you realize that your story is your story, and just remember some of the parts you want to forget are the parts that make you who you are. And so knowing that when you're looking out that window as you're on your journey to being in the moment of now, is that, those things and that particular pathway led you to this moment. And so you have to really deal with it.
Yeah. And I feel like as an artist, you can't achieve that level of fearlessness until you've had the opportunity to consume. I like how you mentioned during the artist talk that when you travel, it's like expanding your menu.
Yeah, because otherwise you just keep eating yourself.
Yeah.
And your menu stays the same, and then you get bored with life and everything around you. So we talked about Ashara, who was just in Nigeria last week, and Omumisha, who was, she lives between New York and Detroit. And I just got back from New York, and I'm going to New Orleans next week. But when you travel to places like Zimbabwe, to places like Paris in Europe or the African continent or Asia, you get to see how you're seen around the world, because you have a notion of who you are. But we never really get to see who we are because our eyes point forward. We only get to see who we are based on how we make others feel, or as a reflection through glass, or how other people love us. And so when you travel the world and no one knows you, it's like you get to see how you are in the world. And it's really interesting in being your authentic self, but also like your American Yankee self, because you're different in different countries, but they look at you from where you come from and then what you bring to the table.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really interesting as I travel just to learn how to be a guest. My grandmother taught me how to be an amazing guest. You always leave the space that you visit better than it was when you landed. So always leave something that is an improvement of that space when you leave. And so that's what I was taught. And so I feel like I did that in Zimbabwe, and I feel like I did it in Paris, and I feel like I do it wherever I carry myself, because I'm being carried by those ancestors. So I think it's a part of my grandmother in me and my great-grandmother in me to make sure that I know how to be a guest. So I get invited back.
Did you always travel, or when did you start?
Well, I've been traveling for 30 years at the college. But I will say that when I was a little girl, I had a neighbor who was a truck driver. And my grandmother always traveled with her cousins and everybody else. So I was always watching people go. And she always took us to family events like in Alabama or wherever we would go. But it was like driving because there were so many of us. And so sometimes we would take the plane. I remember getting the wings from American Airlines. I remember wanting to be like my neighbor, Sam McFadden. He was an elder. He was a father. And he lived 2 doors down from my family, but he was always driving a truck. So he was always
Semi-truck?
gone. Yeah.
Mm.
And he was always gone. But when he came back, he always bought us trinkets. And I was like, I want to be like Sam. I want to be a truck driver. And I don't think it was me wanting to be a truck driver. I think I wanted to travel.
Just get out there.
Right. And so the idea of travel was always in my head and heart. And then when I got the job at CCS, they were like, well, you travel and you'll meet, kids all around the country who are looking for a college of art. And so it's been my answered prayers.
Wow.
Because I've always traveled. And then when Jessica asked me to go to Paris, I was like, girl, I'm coming. So that was in 2016. But I'd already been to islands, but never like that far. I've been to Jamaica and Haiti and so many other places and like Trinidad and little islands, right? And Point Pelee and Canada all the time, right? But never like Europe and never the continent. And so when those opportunities came up, I was ready. Like if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. Like I was ready. Passport, ready.
Yeah. I remember hearing somebody say that you can't be taken seriously as an artist until other countries recognize you as an artist. And then on the panel, I remember you saying something along the lines of feeling more appreciated overseas than you do back home.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and they don't have to tell me what I know. I know I'm a good artist. I know I keep my head down. I do the work. I do fear that there is a thing that happens when you're at home where your family and the people around you take you for granted. Like how many times have you invited your family members to see what you do and they're like, what you doing in here? What you got these black curtains and all this equipment. What are you doing? Until you show them.
Yeah.
And they see you at work and they see the result of what you're doing and then somebody else holds you up and they're like, that's my cousin, but you've been doing the work, right? And so it's just a part of what we do as artists and makers where we just have to keep doing the work and, hopefully the family catches up before we leave.
I connected so much to that when you said that because I was like, it's so true. Why is it that most engagement on my content is from out of state? And I'm like, family, can I get a like? Can I get a share?
Right. And so it's just the nature of what happens in families and in these creative careers that we have.
Why do you think that is, though?
I just don't think they know enough. They're not educated enough. They are so busy in their own lives that they don't see what you're doing. And then when you show them, they're like, oh, that's your little thing? Oh, your little thing. And so at 57, now my family is like, she's been doing it a long time. It must be real. And so now they get it. It's not like it's something I'm playing with.
Yeah.
So I think, just keep inviting them.
And it's cool too because I'm starting to notice like the switch, like the way that they look. And this is not just family. It could be friends or colleagues or something. The way that they look at you and they're like, how you said, oh, it's almost like that vision that you had,
right?
But you just maybe didn't communicate as well as they needed it to be communicated. But it's cool that like once people start to see it,
then they'll support.
It feels good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, it just takes time and you just have to keep doing the work and keep inviting them.
As an established artist in Detroit, what advice would you give to emerging artists in finding their own voice?
Keep doing the work and making sure it touches their heart and connects with their head and their hands. Talk to people who are doing what they want to do. So not necessarily always asking for a mentor, but just sitting down and talking to them. Like, what do you wish somebody would have told you when you were emerging? And what are some things that motivate you to keep going? So as a young artist, my hope is that they stay in touch with folks that are smarter than them. If they're in a room and they're the smartest one in the room, they need to be in a better room, right? And also accessing different foods or things that feed their senses, music, art, dance, not just all the visual arts, but I am fed by so many things, reading books, listening to lectures, podcasts, TED Talks, just going to the library and smelling book mites, you know what I'm saying? So feeding yourself different food, like if you go to another state, visit their library, visit a gallery or a museum while you're there, whatever their cultural institutions they hold. But talk to someone who's been doing what you're doing. Talk to elders, and for me, an elder could be somebody in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, where I can just sit and talk to them. I was just talking to Carol Harris a couple days ago, and she's over 80 or just turned 80. And she's been doing her artwork for a very long time. And I've watched, even when I was a student in college, her trajectory of owning an interior design company and also doing her fine arts work, and knowing that I've always loved the way she's carried herself and her continuation of doing the work. And so, making sure that there are people in your reach or your stratosphere or somewhere in the galaxy where you are shining as a star, but someone who's been shining for a long time, and have a conversation. And so that's the advice that I would give to an emerging artist. Just sit and have conversations, invite somebody to your studio, or ask, can you visit theirs? Can you bring tea? Can you bring coffee? Maybe a meal. Because that's the way you can onboard yourself and get in, and then people will take you serious.
And there's so much access. I mean, there's so many. Here for sure. You may not have access like this in New York or Miami or LA, but in Detroit, there is access. Explain that a little bit. What do you mean by that?
Well, we are a blue-collar city. People work the line. Every second person knows each other. I don't feel like we are a crab in a barrel where we're competing. It's like if Richard has a new drawing or something he's working on, he'll send it to me. Sometimes when I'm working, I'll talk to Mario, or I'll talk to Sidney James or Lakeela Brown or people in my circle, or I'll cheerlead for Jamia Richmond. And so depending on what I'm doing, I'm also talking to Jessica, who's an amazing writer and a friend, and my sister, who's an architect. So I'm always surrounding myself with people who are doing the work, whether they're younger, older, mid-career, senior career. It just feeds me in that way. It's like eating different food with different spices. So I need that just to be who I am.
Yeah. There's almost this like fear of sharing too soon, or fear of sharing before you feel comfortable sharing.
That's usually what happens with very young artists. Folks who are older who have that, there's something else going on. But I love the community we have here. Everybody is open. And those that aren't, But I don't have those issues. I connect with folks and I reach out and I just do taps and hugs, and sometimes I hit and run, and sometimes I hold space for a longer conversation because we both need it at that time. So I feel like this community has access where other communities don't. And we are from, an educational system or a community system here where we know that we need each other in different
Mm-hmm.
ways, and it doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you pursue certain projects? Like, what's your process like when you're getting ready to start a new creative journey or experience? Like, how do you choose what road to go on, what to be a part of, what exhibitions to pursue?
Well, something is in my head and it's in there for a while and it just keeps pulling on me. And then I'm like, ooh, I got to do that.
I call it, for me, my creative to-do list.
Okay. Well, I don't, it's just, I got to do it. It's not a to-do. It's like I have to get it out of my head because it's something telling me and being still long enough so you can hear the spirit tell you to get it and do it. And so
or to get list, to get to list.
Right.
Yeah.
I have to start. I just do it because it's something telling me that I have to do it and I need to listen. That's how I do it.
Has there ever been something that you pursued that didn't turn out the way you hoped for it to?
Always. And failure is an amazing teacher.
100%.
So, I mean, those are just lessons that you have to learn until you get it right. And so sometimes, whatever attempt that I make at something and it's a failure, it's like, okay, I know not to do that again. But I'm going to keep doing it until I succeed at it because I'm that person. So that's me always.
How do you see digital media shifting or shaping the future of art?
There's some AI, artificial intelligence stuff that it's a little weird. But I like tactile things. Like I like touching. I like making. I am piercing, sewing, putting together, gluing, painting, drawing, and performing. So there are some assistant things that I can do with augmented reality and film or photography or collage or all of that. But ultimately, I want to be the sole being to make the decision on how it looks.
And I think that the desire, the need for touch will never go away.
Absolutely.
I think
not. So, I mean, yeah. So I don't have any qualms with the digital aspect that people use because it's also a tool. It's not something that I use frequently enough to be the sole process that I use when I make art.
And I always tell people too, it's like, try thinking about it in a different way.
Yeah.
Don't use it the way it was intended to be used. Use it the way that you're called to use it.
Yeah.
Because as you just described, having it as an assistant, keeping track of your thoughts, coming up with new concepts or coming up with, because another question I think as a creative is, how do you stay adaptable? How do you evolve? How do you stay relevant?
Well, you have to, because the world is moving around you and you have to move with it. You can have your own voice and authenticity, but as the world moves, you have to make sure that you can pivot, that you can be a changeling in certain ways, because buildings that don't bend during hurricanes are not good buildings, right? And so you have to learn how to bend and sway with whatever is coming. And so that is the way of the world. And when you stop swaying, you will break. And so just knowing that, always learning, always experiencing, and giving yourself grace for frustration and not knowing right away.
I think that's one of my favorite parts about age is that you learn to give yourself so much grace to pivot, to change your mind, change your career if you want to. There is no right way. There is no wrong way.
Nope, just keep moving.
It's only your way.
Exactly. but you have to keep moving.
What is something that you have yet to get to that you look forward to bringing to fruition in the next 6 months, 12 months?
Within a year or two, I would say almost two, retiring from working for someone else and just being responsible for bringing in the income that I need to live. Being there for my family, my grandchildren, and my children's children, and needing me in the way that grandmothers are needed. And this traveling the world with whatever I need to say. So I look forward to that. But I can't do it right now. I'm busy. My plate is full, and I only have so much energy in the cabinet.
And that also ties into what we just said. Even if you want to do it for a year, 2 years, and you're like, I'm going to go back to, it's a cool thing. I always like to ask artists that have had experience selling work, successful careers, how do you, or what advice do you give to anybody that is starting the journey of collecting art or developing relationships with artists or figuring out how to even start that process or that journey?
You have to value it first. If you don't value it, nobody else will. So learn how to value your work, your worth, and there is some business parts of it that you have to learn. How to get the word out.
What has been the biggest, one of the most powerful business lessons that you've learned throughout your career to date?
For me, it's just keeping my head down and continuing to stay in the race, in the market, in the game. I feel I'm relevant. I'm not quiet. When I make, I put it out there. Whether somebody is going to buy it or not, but they know it's available. And so I have to be my own advertising campaign marketing person. I have to be my own advocate in the way that sometimes I'm talking to different gallerists and I'm planning for things down the road. I also have to open my studio and open the possibility of people visiting so they can see the amount of work that I have. So I have the work. It's not just a piece here or a piece there. I have the body of work. So it allows folks to take me serious and to know that I am a business and I am my brand. And so learning the business of being an artist, learning what it is to have a sale and who you're sharing those prices with or the cost of it or the value with, because you got to put in some dollars in order to make the dollars too. And sometimes it's a team, and make sure that you're paying your team. And so there are some business aspects that I would say learning is really good.
And I think also breaking that barrier of intimidation, because I think for a lot of people on the outside of the art community looking in, there's this level of intimidation.
I don't get that, because they don't question when they go to the doctor's office and they have to pay for it. They don't question when they go to a lawyer's office and they have to pay for it. So don't question what the artist is doing, because this is also my way to make a living.
And that's the important part. I think that as the creatives, it's the responsibility of any form of creativity to convey the value and not expect people to get it right away. It might take some time, or like how you mentioned, your body of work will speak it for you. I think that that's just such a prevalent topic that I think a lot of people don't know how to address or even begin that conversation.
Well, they got to think about the fact that they have to eat or they will starve. And how will you eat? Figure it out.
Mm-hmm. And sustain. I think it's not just a matter of selling one piece. I think how do people like James Baldwin get to the level of his stature or status? Or
I think he had to just keep writing, and staying in the circles with the other writers and those who published the books and those who edited the books and those who critiqued the books. So staying in that circle and being relevant. So for me, it's an art critic, it's museums, it's galleries, it's collections, it's collectors, and sending out like a monthly email to say, hey, this is available, this is here, please come and see me, I'll walk you through the show.
Sabrina, that is so huge. I think not enough, especially young emerging artists, don't understand the importance of communication, not just in your work, but in your voice. In your what you send out in an email campaign.
Right. Hey, I just want to say thank you for being here. And if you have a
100%.
second, please come and do a studio visit. If you have a moment, I have an exhibit that's going to be up for a month. Please stop by. I'll walk you through the show.
The power of that.
Right. Or I'm graduating soon and I'm having a sale right out of the school. Please come to the student exhibit. Or I don't go to school, but I have a studio and I'd love for you to come and tell me your thoughts because I respect your thoughts and I love your collection, but your eye that you have. And as a person who dreams of someday being in your collection, I would love to hear your thoughts on my work. And so, you got to learn how to advocate for yourself.
Do you remember the first piece that you sold?
Yeah, I remember doing something for the church and it was a graphic design thing. And then I remember one of my drawings sold to a friend of my mother's and it was an assignment from a class and it was beautiful. And he was like, I want to buy this. I was like, you want to buy it? Okay. And so I didn't do pieces with the idea that someone would buy them. I did them because I enjoyed doing them. And so that is my same mission. I don't do artwork to sell. If it sells, that is a wonderful caveat that happens along the journey. But I do it because I have something to say, and that is my language. And so for those who like the conversation that I'm having and they want to purchase it,
Is that an intimate conversation that happens between you and that interested buyer, or is it? Because I've seen at most exhibitions they have a price associated with the piece.
Yeah, sometimes there is a price associated and sometimes it's not. You don't have to sell everything that you make. However, I can't live with everything that I make because I make so much. And so that's okay.
How does an artist define that number or assign?
Well, you have to understand the tools that you use, the materials, and then pay yourself. How many hours did you put in the piece? What's the materials? Is it linen? Is it cotton duck? Is it paper? Is it BFK Reeves paper? Is it the most expensive wax pencils or oil series number 5 or 7? That cost more. Or are these saber brushes? Or are they acrylic, handmade plastic brushes? So think about the materials that you're using, the longevity of what you're using, and then the percentage that the gallery or museum or wherever, museums typically don't sell work, but galleries do. And so what is the percentage that they're asking?
Yeah, the commission.
And what do you give yourself for all of that? And did you have someone to help you deliver the work, frame the work, or make a certain part of it that is a part of the work? So you have to figure all of that out. And that's the business of being an artist.
Should an artist have that calculation determined before they even entertain the idea of selling a piece of work?
No. I mean, you got to figure it out for each piece and you got to know what you spent to make it. And that means your time, your energy, and the materials. So, I mean, that's something you got to figure out. And then each gallery is different. Some take 30, some take 40, some take 50, some take 60%. And you've got to think about that.
What about selling work without a third party involved?
You still have to think about it.
Yeah. In what way?
What are you charging? What is the materials? What is the time? And so you might have studio rent. You may have mortgage or rent. You got to pay yourself because you got to eat.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, all of that has to be considered.
And when does an artist start getting to that point of, all right, I have a lot of sweat equity and time in the game. Like, my time is worth more now. Like, at what point do they start having that conversation in their own mind? And how frequently?
When they've been doing it for a little while and you notice that you're no longer this young artist anymore and your responsibilities to care for yourself are much greater than they were, and you're doing more. You're saying more. So maybe you want to sell more. So you have to determine that. Some people aren't ready. Like Judy Bowman talks about not creating for a long time because she had her children. And then coming back into it after 50-something years, right? And saying, okay, let's go. And so you have to determine when your time is right. And she's like been taking off like crazy. And most people would call her, in terms of the time, not the time that she started, but the time from taking the break on to now, as an emerging artist. And Judy's nowhere near emerging. Judy is over 60 years old, doing the thing, beautiful work, and so many people want it.
The world just caught up late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you have to determine what your place is and how you want to move and how you want to be titled.
Such an interesting topic in cultural communities, because I feel like we always feel this level of, some people call it imposter syndrome. Some people call it like, I don't know if I belong here.
You got to make sure you belong wherever you are and stand in it. You know, there were so many people that made it happen up to this so you could live this life. And think about those ancestors that paved the way for you. And you have to honor them by doing the work.
Yeah.
And valuing. Give yourself permission to value yourself. So, I mean, it sometimes takes people a while, but I don't. Well.
What's one piece of advice that you share or often have to remind the people that matter the most to you in your life, that also have pursued careers in the creative landscape?
Not everything is for everybody. And some people won't get it. And it's not your job to please everybody. Feed yourself first. Please your heart, those ancestors, and just stand in your truth.
What do you say to someone that feels like they're doing everything, or at least in their mind, they're doing everything they can. They thought they did everything right, but they're just not seeing what they want to see right now in this moment? Like, because I feel like there's so many.
There's all this thing called divine timing.
Yeah,
it's not about what you want, but it's about what's for you is yours. It's coming anyway. Why are you rushing it? You trying to tell God to hurry up, give me these blessings right now.
I love that you just said the word rush. You cannot rush. That's like saying you're trying to hurry up and finish. What are you trying to finish?
I don't know.
Well, Sabrina, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I value you're such an incredible human, artist, woman.
You.
And everything that you do is always so amazing. So I can't wait to see all the incredible work that you have yet to come to the world.
Well, I appreciate you being here and holding this space and having this platform for people like me and Richard. And I wish you all of the joy. And also when people discover, like Christopher Columbus, which means you've been doing the work, right? Discover you, that they lift your platform so others in their circle can also know the work that you've been doing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That's a wrap.
All right. Click.